The Young and the Restless Spoilers. Everyone believed Diane's return to Jack's bedside would become a moment of forgiveness, healing, and emotional reunion. After everything that had happened, after the terror caused by Patty and the long hours in which Jack's life hung by a thread, it seemed almost natural to assume that Diane would put the past aside. Jack had survived. He had finally opened his eyes. The nightmare was supposedly ending, and the people who loved him could begin rebuilding what had nearly been destroyed. Diane herself appeared overwhelmed when she saw him awake. Relief rushed across her face so quickly and so intensely that, for a brief moment, even Jack believed the worst was behind them. She moved closer to him with tears in her eyes, her expression softening as she watched him struggle to focus on the room around him. She looked like a wife who had nearly lost the man she loved and had suddenly been given one more chance to hold him, speak to him, and imagine a future that only hours earlier had seemed impossible. Yet appearances could be dangerously misleading, especially when the wounds beneath them had never truly healed. Diane was happy that Jack had survived, but happiness was not the same as forgiveness. Relief was not reconciliation. Love, even when it remained powerful, could exist beside hatred, resentment, humiliation, and the unbearable memory of betrayal. Diane had not forgotten what Jack had done to her, and she had certainly not forgiven it. The joy she felt when he woke up did nothing to erase the rage buried inside her. If anything, his survival gave that rage a living target. It forced her to confront the man who had broken her trust while still expecting her devotion. Everyone around them might have wanted to believe that the crisis had brought Diane and Jack closer together, but Diane knew the truth. The stabbing had not repaired their marriage. It had merely interrupted the collapse. Jack's near death had postponed the reckoning, but it had not canceled it. Now that he was awake, the pain he had caused her returned with brutal clarity, and the love that had drawn her to his bedside began twisting into something darker. Diane had spent too much time being judged, doubted, and forced to prove that she was worthy of a place in Jack's life. She had endured suspicion from people who believed she would always be manipulative, selfish, or dangerous. She had fought to convince Jack that she had changed, that her feelings were real, and that the life they had built together meant more to her than any scheme from her past. For a time, she believed Jack understood that. She believed he had chosen her completely. She believed that whatever enemies surrounded them, they would face those enemies together. Then Jack betrayed her, and the betrayal reached far beyond a single mistake. To Diane, it proved that all her sacrifices had been meaningless. It showed her that Jack could still turn away from her when it mattered most, could still treat her loyalty as something temporary, and could still expect her to remain waiting when he finally decided to return. His actions had humiliated her. They had made her feel disposable in the very relationship she had struggled hardest to protect. Jack might have told himself that his choices were complicated or that circumstances had pushed him into decisions he regretted, but Diane saw no such complexity. She saw a man who had made a promise and then shattered it. She saw a husband who wanted forgiveness simply because he had finally realized the damage he had caused. His regret might have been genuine, but regret did not restore trust. An apology could not erase the nights Diane had spent wondering whether she had ever truly mattered to him. It could not remove the anger that had attached itself to every memory of their marriage. Even the happiest moments now felt poisoned because Diane could no longer look back on them without asking whether Jack's love had ever been as strong as he claimed. Her fury had become woven into everything. It colored the way she looked at him, the way she remembered his promises, and the way she interpreted every frightened attempt he made to reach her. She could not deny it any longer. She did not merely feel hurt. She wanted him to suffer. She wanted Jack to understand what it meant to be powerless in front of someone he had trusted. She wanted him to experience the fear, helplessness, and emotional destruction that his betrayal had inflicted on her. The thought frightened even Diane because she still loved him, but the love no longer restrained the rage. Instead, it intensified it. Only someone she loved so deeply could have wounded her so completely. Jack sensed the change before he fully understood it. At first, he saw only Diane's tears and assumed they came from relief. His body was weak, his mind clouded by pain, medication, and fragmented memories of Patty's attack. He remembered the cold shock of the blade entering him, the panic in Patty's eyes, and the sudden realization that he might die before he could correct any of the mistakes he had made. Those memories remained close to the surface, making every movement in the room seem threatening. Even the quiet hum of the medical equipment seemed to remind him how narrowly he had escaped death. When Diane approached, he expected comfort. He expected her hand to reach for his, perhaps hesitantly, perhaps with anger still between them, but with enough tenderness to reassure him that he was safe. Instead, she stood over him, in a silence that grew more unsettling with every passing second. Her expression changed almost imperceptibly. The tears remained, but the warmth disappeared. Her face became still, almost unreadable, and Jack felt an instinctive fear he could not explain. He tried to speak calmly, knowing that any sudden movement sent pain through his body. He attempted to acknowledge his mistakes, to make Diane understand that he knew he had failed her, and to promise that he would spend whatever time remained proving his remorse. Yet the more he tried to explain, the more distant she seemed. She had heard apologies before. She had listened to Jack justify choices that had already destroyed her confidence in him. His words no longer sounded healing. To Diane, they sounded desperate, convenient, and unbearably late. Jack was asking for mercy only after learning how quickly life could be taken from him. Had Patty never attacked him, Diane wondered, would he have truly understood what he had done? Would he have returned to her with the same desperation, or would he have continued expecting her to endure his betrayal in silence? These questions moved through her mind as she watched him struggle in the hospital bed. Jack looked fragile, but Diane could not forget how powerful he had seemed when he made the decisions that broke her heart. His weakness did not make him innocent. His injuries did not transform him into a faithful husband. Surviving Patty's attack did not erase his responsibility. Diane had reunited with him because some part of her needed to see him alive, but that part now stood beside another part that demanded revenge. The anger inside Diane had been building for too long, held beneath carefully controlled expressions and moments of forced restraint. She had told herself that she could wait until Jack recovered, that she could separate her resentment from the immediate crisis, and that she would not allow Patty's violence to dictate her own actions. But seeing Jack awake changed everything. His eyes searched her face with trust and fear, and that combination became unbearable. He still believed she would protect him. He still believed that whatever he had done, Diane would ultimately choose love over rage. That assumption felt like another insult. Jack had betrayed her, and yet remained confident that she would be the one to show compassion. Diane's breathing grew heavier as memories returned one after another. The promises he had made, the moments he had pulled away, the humiliation she had hidden from others, and the knowledge that he had placed another person or another loyalty above their marriage. She could feel her anger tightening around every thought. There was no longer any way to pretend it was temporary. It had become part of her. When her hand moved toward her pocket, Jack noticed the motion but did not immediately understand it. He was still trying to speak, still searching for words that might reach the woman he loved. Then Diane slowly withdrew the knife. The sight of it changed the room completely. Jack's face went pale, his breath catching as his body instinctively pressed back against the bed. For one horrifying second, he believed Patty had returned. The weapon triggered the memory of the stabbing so violently that Jack could almost feel the original wound opening again. Then he realized that the knife was in Diane's hand, and the terror became even deeper. Patty had attacked him out of obsession and instability, but Diane knew him better than almost anyone. She knew exactly where he was wounded. She knew how weak he remained. She knew he had no strength to defend himself or escape. Jack's fear was not simply the fear of being stabbed again. It was the realization that the person he expected to save him might now become the person who finished what Patty had started. Jack tried to remain calm because panic caused pain to tear through his body. His heart raced, the monitor beside him reacting to every spike of fear while he struggled to keep his voice steady. He understood immediately that the wrong word could push Diane past the point of restraint. This was no longer an ordinary confrontation between a husband and wife. Diane was holding a weapon, and Jack was trapped in a hospital bed, still recovering from a nearly fatal attack. He could not stand, could not reach the door, and could not know whether anyone outside would hear him if he cried for help. His only chance was to make Diane listen. He begged for forgiveness, not with the confidence of a man who expected to receive it, but with the desperation of someone finally forced to confront the full consequences of his actions. Jack admitted that he had been wrong. He acknowledged that he had broken her trust and that nothing he said could undo the damage. He tried to tell her that revenge would not heal her, that hurting him would only destroy whatever remained between them, and that she would have to live with the consequences long after her anger faded. Yet Jack knew how hollow those words might sound. He had asked Diane to live with the consequences of his betrayal, and now he was pleading with her not to make him live with the consequences of her rage. The imbalance was obvious. Diane saw it too. Jack wanted patience because he was afraid. He wanted calm because his survival depended on it. He wanted Diane to think about the future now that his own future had become uncertain. Every appeal for reason only reminded her that he had not shown the same care when he endangered their marriage. Diane tightened her grip on the knife, and Jack watched the movement with growing horror. He had barely survived Patty's blade. The wound had not healed, his strength had not returned, and another attack could easily kill him. The thought of being stabbed twice, first by Patty and then by Diane, was almost impossible to process. These were two women whose lives had become entangled with his in completely different ways, yet both now seemed capable of turning their pain against him. Jack wondered whether he had misunderstood Diane entirely or whether his betrayal had pushed her into becoming someone neither of them recognized. Diane stood close enough to see every trace of fear on his face. Part of her felt satisfaction. Jack was finally looking at her as though she held power over him. He was no longer the man deciding the direction of their marriage. He was no longer the person who could leave her waiting while he followed his own desires. His fate appeared to rest in her hands, and for one dangerous instant that power felt like justice. Diane imagined the blade moving forward. She imagined Jack feeling the same shock and helplessness she had felt when she discovered his betrayal. She imagined him understanding, in the most brutal way possible, that trust could become a weapon when placed in the wrong hands. But revenge was not as simple as the fantasy's anger created. Jack's terror did not erase Diane's memories of loving him. His weakness did not make her forget every moment when he had defended her, believed in her, or offered her a life she once thought she would never have. As she looked at him, the man who betrayed her and the man she loved occupied the same frightened face. That contradiction made her rage even more painful. She wanted to punish him, but she also hated seeing him afraid of her. She wanted him to beg, yet hearing his desperation brought no peace. The knife gave her control, but it could not give her back the marriage she believed she had lost. Even if she struck him, the betrayal would remain. Even if Jack suffered, Diane would still remember what he had done. Violence could create a new wound, but it could not close the old one. Still, she could not immediately lower the weapon. The anger had carried her too far, and stepping back now would mean facing the emptiness beneath it. Without revenge, Diane would have to decide whether she could remain beside Jack knowing she might never trust him again. She would have to accept that survival did not guarantee a happy reunion, and that love might not be strong enough to repair what betrayal had destroyed. Jack saw hesitation in her eyes and tried to hold on to it. He knew Diane had not completely crossed the line, but he also knew how unstable the moment had become. His body trembled despite his efforts to appear calm. Every shallow breath reminded him of Patty's attack, and every glance at the knife convinced him that history was about to repeat itself. He pleaded with Diane to remember who she was before anger consumed her. He did not ask her to forget his betrayal, because he finally understood that forgetting was impossible. Instead, he asked for the chance to face her hatred without forcing her to become a killer. He accepted that she might leave him, expose him, humiliate him, or refuse every apology he offered. He accepted that she might never look at him with love again. But he begged her not to turn one unforgivable act into another. Jack's words reached the part of Diane that still understood consequences, yet they also intensified her resentment. Once again, Jack was asking her to be better than he had been. He had acted selfishly, but she was expected to show restraint. He had destroyed her trust, but she was expected to protect his life. He had created the pain, but she was responsible for controlling what that pain made her want to do. Diane's hand shook as the knife remained suspended between them. The tension in the room became suffocating. Jack watched her face, searching for any sign that the woman he loved still existed behind the fury. Diane watched Jack in return, measuring the sincerity of his fear against the depth of her own suffering. Neither of them could escape the truth. Jack had betrayed her. Diane wanted revenge. Patty's attack had brought them together physically, but emotionally they stood farther apart than ever. The reunion everyone expected had become a confrontation neither Jack nor Diane was prepared to survive. Jack had awakened believing that life had given him another chance. He now realized that survival was only the beginning of his punishment. He would have to face every consequence of the decisions he had made, and Diane's forgiveness could not be demanded simply because he had nearly died. Diane, meanwhile, discovered that revenge did not feel like freedom. It felt like standing at the edge of an irreversible decision while the man she loved begged her not to fall. Her anger was real, undeniable, and powerful enough to place a knife in her hand. But whether it was powerful enough to make her use it remained uncertain. Jack's eyes moved from Diane's face to the blade and then back again. He knew he had made terrible mistakes, but he had never imagined that his betrayal would bring him to this moment, wounded, defenseless, and pleading with his wife not to stab him after Patty had already nearly taken his life. Diane stepped closer, and Jack's fear intensified as the knife caught the light. For a heartbeat, it appeared that she had made her decision. Her expression hardened, her grip tightened, and Jack prepared himself for the pain he was certain would come. Yet beneath the rage, beneath the humiliation and desire for vengeance, Diane was fighting one final battle with herself. The question was no longer whether she could forgive Jack, because she could not. The real question was whether her inability to forgive him would become the reason she destroyed him, and whether Jack's second chance at life was about to end at the hands of the woman who had once promised never to leave his side.